Hello, everybody. Welcome back to episode 10 of the Progressive Democrats of Howard County podcast. We've got a very special one for you all, but before we get into the details, hope everybody's been well. It has been a little bit since our last podcast episode, but we've been busy, been doing a lot of different things, but we're glad to be back. Hiruy, how things been on your end?
Hey, Jake. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this episode. And as Jake mentioned, we do have a very important episode. I would say every single one of our episodes are very important, but this one, these series of episodes are probably the most important that we've done so far. So thank you all for joining us. Jake?
Yeah, I think this might be the first time that we've actually interviewed candidates on the podcast, if my memory serves. And as Hiruy kind of foreshadowed a little bit, we are doing a series of interviews on the HoCo4Us Slate, running for Democratic Central Committee, which both Hiruy and myself are a part of. And we just wanted to talk to each slate member, give the public and the voters a chance to hear a little bit about each member of the slate. So there are 17 members of the HoCo4Us Slate. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be interviewing each of them. And so we are very happy to kick off this new series with one of our members of our slate, Taneeka Richardson. Taneeka, how are you doing?
I'm doing fine, Jake. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being on. Thank you for running with us. So I guess just to start off, how about you introduce yourself to the world, to the county, tell a little bit about yourself for, people who aren't familiar.
Sure. So for folks who don't know, my name is Taneeka, and I am a Howard County resident. I've lived here since 2005. I relocated here from Baltimore City. Actually by chance, using a housing choice voucher, I was able to kind of relocate here, kind of give my family a second start, better start, for better lack of words. And we've been here ever since. So this is kind of like my second home. This is like Howard County, as all my kids know. I'm a mom of 5. I have 2 OM graduates as we speak. And I have an 8th grader at Wild Lake, and a 4th grader at Thunderhill, and a 2-year-old. So she's not in school yet, so we'll see where she ends up. But yeah, I've been here, been pretty active in a lot of different things around Howard County, mainly around housing. I normally get kind of pulled in for kind of my advice and different recommendations just based off of my experience and just, my lived experience with being a voucher recipient. So I got experience with that, but I love all policy areas though.
Yeah.
So, Taneeka, looking at your resume and a set of accomplishments, you definitely have an impressive resume. And we're definitely, I'm definitely glad to be running with you on this slate. And you alluded to some of your experience in the county. Can you talk about some recent experiences in terms of activism that would let the voter know more about what you're interested in and what you think is important to address?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that question. So I'm fortunate enough that at my day job, I'm a policy analyst and my 9 to 5 for a nonprofit. So my boss is really cool and progressive, so to speak, and kind of let us just kind of come up with our own research ideas. So things I'm really passionate about really is, I know it sounds cliche, but I'm really obviously big into equity as a minority, as an African-American woman. I'm really big into equity, whether that's with housing, employment, transportation, the criminal justice system, all those things kind of are important to me as a mom, and most importantly, as a mom of 4 African-American sons. So I'm always kind of looking at all different areas. Most recently in Howard County, though, I was asked to be on the Howard County Racial Equity Task Force. So that was, enlightening and a good experience to kind of come together with other Howard County residents and kind of come up with recommendations for the county council. I was also on like the Attorney General's COVID task force, and that was more like a statewide thing. But of course, I'm always, looking at how state policy can translate to local policy and what that means here for Howard County. And then, as you guys know, I was with you guys with the SROs, trying to figure out, how we can, still, keep our children safe at school and still make it a safe place for learning as well. So those are like 3 of the most recent things I've kind of been doing with COVID. So.
Yeah, no, thank you for letting everybody know about, you're a busy woman doing a lot of different things, and now candidate on top of that. Yeah, I mean, I think I had worked with you, how we first met was through the Police Accountability Task Force, and then, was happy to see, months later, your name come up again on the Racial Equity Task Force. And so I'm not sure which subcommittee you served on with the Racial Equity Task Force, but I'm curious, equity, I think, is obviously an incredibly important thing. It's something, sort of central to the HoCo4Us Slate that we're running on. But, how do you feel about sort of, do you ever feel like equity gets talked about a lot in rhetoric, but, there's sort of a lack of action behind it? And maybe what do you think that the Democratic Party could do better to actually bring equity?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jake, and thank you for that question. So I was on the Housing Committee, right, by default. But so just a little quick background, like obviously I grew up from Baltimore City, right? I was born and raised. That's literally where all my family is. I don't have any family, here. I just kind of built my own relationship. So moving from Baltimore City to here, that was in itself kind of like a culture shock and a huge change, because I was moving away as a single mom with no support system out here. However, when I came out here, coming from that type of environment, because we all know the city has its problems, but I was just like, it was like a culture shock to me. I was like, wow, this county is so great. I remember my boys going to school and they was like, I remember the first time they brought home textbooks. I was like, what the heck? They got textbooks out here? Like, we didn't have textbooks, we just had Xerox copies and stuff. So it's like, I was kind of like in this bubble of like, oh, it's so great, it's so perfect, we don't have any problems, everything is so fine. And then like as I started going to college, and actually my move out here, because initially, let me tell you that story, I initially was going to school for nursing. That was my trade. Like most of the women in my family are nurses, or the men went into the military, right? That's what my family does. But just moving and seeing the differences, it kind of got me interested in public health, which is how I ended up changing my major to public health. So it was through those classes, and I remember talking to someone, and I was like, well, we got the #1 school system, like Howard County is the bomb, that's it, we're the best. And it just was like, and they had me thinking, it was like, well, it's the best for who, right? So it had me thinking like, what do they mean, like the best for who, right? And it's just kind of like, once you start looking at the data, and you start breaking down like, okay, yeah, we might have the #1 school system, we might have all these different resources, about who's actually taking advantage of these resources, right? Who's able to take these AP classes, who's able to do all these things to kind of set them on a path towards college, or a better, for a better economic future. So once I started looking at all of that, I was like, okay, I see the disparities here, right? And that's just with the education piece. Within 5 years of living in Howard County, I definitely noticed that all the affordable housing is concentrated in certain villages. So it was kind of like me riding through Longreach for Village, for example, and I just was like, if this was Baltimore City, this would definitely be a food desert, right? Because they didn't have like a supermarket for, they don't think, they still don't have a supermarket. But when I first, they didn't have a market for like the longest time, right? And I know like a lot of public housing is there. So like, it's just like stuff that I was noticing, that I noticed that kind of wasn't fair, and it just didn't make sense to me, like why. And it was kind of resembling kind of like the segregation that we see in the city a little bit, with kind of how certain communities are kind of clustered together. And I could see the comparison even in Howard County, kind of similar to what I came from, which is how I kind of started advocating around different policies for housing in Howard County.
So, Taneeka, as you were talking, I started thinking about this question here, and this is I think this leads to the impetus of why we're doing this. As you know, I think for the most part, Howard County has been governed by some form of a Democratic majority, one way or another, for a few years, at least a couple of decades. Mm-hmm. And there are people who would say that things things are going fine, and we're working toward equity, and we're improving things. I'm not one of those people. I think that that's why I'm running, in that we need to because of this the segregation that you speak of, that's been segregated communities. So to that question, or to the notion that given who's been given what's been going on in terms of who's been governing and how that has happened, what has happened as a result of that, would you agree to the notion that the party in its current form is making progress toward equity and desegregating communities and improving providing equitable allocation of resources?
My honest answer would be no. I don't see that on the surface, just on a number of different fronts. I mean, just for example, like I live, granted now they finally are rebuilding our school, but I lived in Oakland Mills Village for a number of years, right? And I know for a fact that Oakland Mills Village, as far as funding for our schools, like we were kind of at the bottom thread, right? So I definitely don't see it. Now, I mean, I ride around and I see all the development taking place. I see that, right? I see the congestion. I see back roads that I used to take that were back roads that are no longer back roads because the traffic and stuff is super crowded, right? But even with the stuff that is being built, it's still not affordable. You know what I mean? So for example, take me, for example, who I would think I'm successful, like I did everything I was supposed to do. I went to school, I got my GED, I got 2 degrees. I've lived here for like 16, 17 years, and yet I want to buy a home, and I may possibly have to look outside of the district, right? Because it's just so expensive here. It's nothing really affordable here. It's not too many homeownership programs here that really do help. And the one that is here, we don't have enough time to talk about that in the interview, but that program has its own faults as well. That was something that we talked about on a task force, and they're trying to kind of redo that to make that better. But it's just really sad because I hear stories all the time about teachers who work here who can't afford to buy here. So it's just like we're building up $1 and $2 million homes, and I'm like, who's going to be able to afford that? You know what I mean? So it's just yeah. A lot more can definitely be done to spread equity for everyone, especially for people who have actually lived here and called it home. As I would like to say, development without displacement, right? So.
Absolutely. And, thank you for, sharing your experience, your story with us. And, I think it is such a shame that, so many people who aren't from Howard County originally hear about its, good reputation. They work really hard, save up a lot of money to finally move to, try to give their family, better resources, better place to grow up. And then, after they've spent all that money, it's so expensive to live here, they realize like, oh, things aren't as equitable as they seem from the outside. And, now I'm already here and I paid for all this, but I'm not getting the results that the reputation would lead me to expect. So thank you for that, Taneeka. Unfortunately, as we said, these are going to be short interviews. So I don't think we have time for any more questions from Taneeka, but thank you, Taneeka. Definitely everybody check her out on social media. Again, HoCo4Us HoCo4Us.com, number 4, HoCo4Us.com. She's running on the